My name is Brian Schnee with KUTV2 News in Salt Lake City. Many marvel at the natural resources Utah provides with a desire to live in the mountains and forests. An area I've taken great pride in while working in the news media throughout Utah and the West is reporting on wildfires. And as devastating as wildfire can be, wildland fires were once a natural part of most of Utah in what are called fire-dependent ecosystems. Along the Wasatch Front, homes continue to be built further up into the foothills and benches. And throughout Utah, as the population increases, we see development further away from communities and areas at a higher risk of wildfire. These are called the wildland-urban interface, or simply put, the WUI, where homes are built into the forests and rangelands. Throughout the West, from Colorado to California and Alberta, Canada to Hawaii, we've seen the destruction caused by wildfires. I witnessed firsthand the destruction of the Almeda fire, with 2,800 structures burned and 3 lives taken in southern Oregon, an area I lived and worked in for many years. While Utah will probably not see the urban conflagrations witnessed in the Los Angeles area, at least not to the extent seen in California, the recent Forsyth fire that burned more than a dozen homes in Pine Valley, Utah, is evidence we can see in terms of losses from wildfires here in the Beehive State. Those who live in the WUI have a shared responsibility with those around them to learn to live within wildland fire zones. Please take a moment to listen to Brad Washa from Utah State University Extension to learn what you can do better to protect your home and family from the threat of wildfire.
So Brad Washa, Assistant Professor of Wildland Fire Science with Utah State University Extension and part of the Quinney College of Agriculture and Natural Resources. Today we're looking at what's called the wildland-urban interface, sometimes commonly referred to just as WUI or built communities. And when you build in the wildland-urban interface, we need to realize first of all that we are building in fire-dependent ecosystems. These ecosystems have evolved in part because of fire, and we're building in those areas. So with that, knowing that, we have kind of a shared responsibility in doing practices around our home that will better protect it in the event of a wildfire. And that starts from the beginning as far as developing a community to building your own home yourself. So how you construct your house and how you look at the fuels around that structure. And that can even occur even after the house is built, and what we call home hardening. So today we're going to look at a home in the Park City area that is within the wildland urban interface, and they've done a number of measures as far as trying to make that home defensible in the event of a wildfire. 3 zones that we look at when we look at what we call home ignition zone. And that first zone is the immediate zone. So it's within the first 5 feet of the structure. And that's looking at, we almost like to call that the lean, clean, and green zone, where you don't have vegetation growing, or if you do have vegetation, it's irrigated. So in this case, this house, first of all, you look at what materials are built out of the house. This has a fire-resistant, cement-based material that the house is constructed of. Then you look at immediately around the home. It's got nice gravel around the home, within 5 feet of the house. It's got a little bit of vegetation growing, but it's not like if an ember were to fall into that vegetation, that would be a concern. We also look at the top of the structure in the eaves, and we don't see any vents on this home. So that's a really great feature to have as far as nothing that an ember is going to get into. This home does have triple pane glass, so that's also a little bit of a benefit to if a fire were to occur in this area. So that immediate zone, it does extend, in this case, onto their patio. On their patio, they don't have a lot of materials that are flammable. You don't see a pile of wood or that sort of thing. So that's a really good plus. The deck is made out of concrete, so that's non-flammable. A lot of times we'll see wooden decks, and there's special precautions you need to take if you do have a wooden deck in screening underneath so that embers wouldn't land below the wooden deck and potentially ignite that wooden deck on fire. And when we extend then from that immediate zone, looking here, we do see, maybe where they could trim back this tree a little bit, because again, that immediate zone is 0 to 5 feet. So then the next zone is the intermediate zone, and that extends from 5 feet to 30 feet. So they have done a couple good things. In this case, they've limbed up this tree or removed the ladder fuel. So if fire was to start on the surface, it would be harder for fire to reach the crown of the tree and start the tree on fire, which would be a major concern. They've also really done a nice job allowing aspen trees to grow around the property. And aspen is what we call a shaded fuel break, and that can be very effective as far as reducing the risk of fire. So we're in the intermediate zone, and we can see that they've got kind of a natural garden that they do irrigate. You'd want to make sure that you do water this throughout the fire season, because in August you don't want this grass to all cure out and then be combustible. And again, that intermediate zone is 5 feet to 30 feet. Then they also, on the edges of the intermediate zone, we do have aspen growing, and that's nice. And then that goes into the extended zone, and that extended zone is 30 feet to 100 feet, and that can even be extended. If you're on a hilltop or on a steep slope, that can be extended to 200 feet. So again, that extended zone, that 30 to 100 feet, you don't want concentrations of vegetation. You want to go in and limb up your conifers like they've done here. They've also removed a number of conifers in this area to just open up the stand, and in this case we're seeing the aspen promoted very well. It also, unlike the mixed conifer, the evergreen trees, those evergreens have resins in them that make them more volatile from fires. So we do like to, at least around the home ignition zone, minimize our use of planting with mixed conifer, and a lot of people like to use Colorado blue spruce, and unless it's irrigated, it's not the preferred tree to be, in that immediate area adjacent to your house. Again, we're in that intermediate zone, and they have aspen growing. Aspen, again, is we call it a shaded fuel break, so it can be effective at reducing fire when it comes through an area. The one thing about aspen, though, is it can be kind of a messy tree. If you plant an aspen, it'll want to sucker up, and you'll get small regeneration occurring that you can either cut out or leave in place. It makes for a nice natural feeling. They do have a white fir and looks like a green spruce also in this area, and you can have an occasional spruce tree just to mix things up a little bit, but you don't want a lot of that mixed conifer. Looking at, again, the immediate zone and the construction of the building, a couple things. Again, they're using siding that is fire resistant. They also have weather stripping. I'm sure their reason for the weather stripping is because it gets cold up here and try to reduce cold air going into the garage. But there's weather stripping also in the event of a wildfire, and the number one cause of home ignition in a wildfire is actually embers coming in. This is going to keep embers from going into the garage and between that space that otherwise would be found next to the garage door and the surface of the house itself. So within the extended zone, again, that's 30 feet to 100 and can be even up to 200 feet if you're on a steep slope or on the top of a ridge line. That area, sometimes you don't have full control over that because a lot of people don't have 100 feet of property between their home and even perhaps the next home. But in this case, their extended zone, they've removed some of the conifers. What conifers that do exist, the larger ones, they've limbed up, and they're also allowing the aspen to come in and replace some of that conifer. This area actually a couple years ago had a major bug kill in the white fir. We had a fir engraver beetle that came in and decimated a lot of our white spruce, and the HOA has open space adjacent to this property, and they removed a lot of those dead trees. They cut them down, thinned out those dead trees, piled them, and then burnt those piles. One thing in the immediate zone we talk about is what's called home hardening. That can be both when you're constructing the home and deciding on materials, or you can go back after the fact and do certain measures. In this case, when this home was built, again, they used fire-resistant, fibrous, cement-based product. And then you can see they also use corrugated aluminum, and that's also an excellent product to utilize. One thing with the corrugated aluminum, or if you have metal roofs, you need to look out at the bottom, is embers could get in to those places and get up into the structure itself. So you need to look at that both on metal roofs and if you're using corrugated aluminum. So homes are typically burnt in two fashions. One is through radiant heat, and that would be like a tree torching out next to the house, and that tree then burning, starting the house on fire. The other main cause is actually from embers, starting from a tree torching out far, could be up to a mile away, those embers landing in a receptive fuel bed. In this case, again, looking at that home ignition zone and that immediate zone, that 0 to 5 feet, this structure, we have wood chips that go right up to the house itself. So those wood chips, an ember could land in the wood chips, and then the wood chips actually start the house on fire. And that's a major concern in this case of having, while we don't want to have wood chips immediately adjacent to the house as we see here. So within that 5-foot zone, we also have an Austrian pine, this little shrub here, that again, if embers were to land in the base of it, this mixed conifer could start on fire, start this pole on fire, and then the whole house goes up. So another concern with this structure here. You wouldn't think about it, but even something as simple as this doormat made of natural fibers, if embers were to land on that, that could start on fire. In this case, you know, there's concrete between that and the wooden door, but a lot of times we'll have a mat right next to the wooden door, and that could also be a receptive fuel to start a fire. Here we have a wooden fence, about 30 years old. Concern I really have with this wooden fence is it also has wood chips. So an ember could land on the wood chips, and that's a receptive fuel bed, then start the fence on fire. And I have seen in cases on the Waldo Canyon fire where a wood fence started on fire, that fence then burnt to the deck. The next day, that house was gone. We didn't have enough resources to put on it to stop the fire. The one benefit this wood fence does have, you can open the gate and leave the gate open. With that gate open, that would break, if this wooden fence started on fire, that would break that connection between the wooden fence and the house burning. And but you would have to have that fence open, and you want to prop it open because a lot of times when we have wildland fires, there's winds associated with them and the like. So in the backyard, there's a couple things that come to mind that I see that are concerning about this structure. One is we've got a vent here that leads into the basement. That vent has a covering, but it's basically to keep rodents out. You'd actually want to have screening on there so that embers could not get into the basement. We also see artificial turf, and although there's not good scientific papers about artificial turf, if you talk to firefighters and structure departments, they really do not like artificial turf when it comes to fire. First of all, it is a petroleum-based product, so it will burn. The flame lengths are probably not going to be large enough to be a concern, but when it does burn, it smolders, and it puts out a lot of volatile chemicals, being that it's a petroleum-based product. So another thing we see, you know, especially if you got ponderosa pine or lodgepole pine in your area, is it likes to gather around homes or on roofs. And this is one thing you do not want to have, is pine needle drape laying at the base of your house in a corner like this, that again, embers could land on this and ignite the house on fire. Lastly, you know, looking at this house, everybody likes to have their firewood, if they have a fireplace in the house, right next to the door and adjacent to the house. This is a big watch out situation as far as from a fire concern. Again, embers could land on this and combust. And even in the Forsyth fire down in Pine Valley, heard stories of people having firewood decks right in front of the house. The fire department actually came in, wet it down, but it was not enough to stop that pile of firewood from burning, and the house actually was lost. From individual homes to urban conflagrations, we continue to see structure loss, not only in Utah and the western United States, but worldwide. While these measures we looked at will not ensure the survival of any structure, they at least give you a greater probability of success. The concepts of the home ignition zone also provide for greater firefighter safety and give fire suppression resources a fighting chance to save your home. There are numerous sources of information on reducing your risk to wildfire. Many local fire departments, the Utah Division of Forestry, Fire and State Lands, and county fire wardens can conduct home assessments to help you better understand what you can do to better protect your home. Please see these links found in the video description for additional information from the National Interagency Fire Center, the National Fire Protection Association, and Utah State University Extension on Firewise Landscaping in Utah and the home ignition zone. We all need to do our part to develop fire-adapted communities when living in the WUI or where the eaves meet the leaves. Our hope is that this discussion has helped spearheaded some thought on your part and provide some resources when living in our beautiful state and the wildland-urban interface. Thanks for watching this video, and thank you to Brian Sneed and the KUTV 2 News for collaborating on this project.